Hello and welcome to the 15-minute show, part of the Arsenal Therapy podcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam Keys, and thank you to everyone that joins us to watch these shows. Today, we are going to do a deep dive into William Saliba and Gabriel Magalhães and discuss what has made them the best centre-back partnership in world football and why Arsenal are the team that have conceded the least goals, scored the most, and what goes into making such a sound structure at any club. Because the reality is, only so much is down to the individuals themselves. But with these two, these are two of the best defenders on the planet. These are two players that absolutely live to defend. They're two players that are incredible on the ball. They follow the coach's instructions to the letter. And we're going to discuss what those instructions are, what the two of them do, what makes them so good, and why Arsenal are such a defensively sound team. For the first time in my lifetime, and for many people watching, it'll be the first time since George Graham's days that Arsenal have had such a solid defensive foundation. So without any further ado, let's have a look at some numbers. So always a nice way to get started on the morning. So Arsenal in the Premier League this year, most score in 2024, have the most goals scored with 33 goals already. 8 wins on the bounce, the most wins. Fewest shots faced on target, 16. Fewest goals conceded, 14. Fewest XGOT conceded, which is goals after the shot is taken. And the fewest defeats with 0. 100% record on top of the league. Now, these stats have come from Squawka, and then there is no more reliable source out there than Squawka. But look, what makes these really interesting, I think the first one is, and the very key thing within this that you have to look at, is the fewest shots faced on target. That's a massive stat. 16 shots faced across 8 games, averaging 2 shots a game. That's an incredible statistic. And when you look at it, Arsenal are yet to concede a single goal at the Emirates this season in the Champions League. And we've got an XG conceded of 1.55 goals. That's absolutely remarkable given some of the sides that we've already played. And a big part of it is down to Saliba and Gabriel. And the crazy thing is, we went into last season sweating on whether William Saliba would sign a new contract at Arsenal. He signed it. You see his passion every time he pulls on that red shirt. He's absolutely loving being at the club. And him and Gabriel are just so crucial to each other. And in a recent interview they did together, they discussed what makes them so good. And one of the things they said, they communicate really well. And communication is a huge part of football. From you're very, very young, the first thing you're taught to do on the pitch is speak to each other, talk to your teammates, let them know where you are, call for the ball, all the very basics, the fundamentals of the game, because the game is about communication. Football is a universal language, but you need to be able to communicate. And one of the things that Gabriel's been working very hard on is improving his English. He now speaks English, but when he arrived, that was a struggle for him. That it wasn't as easy to communicate. It was something that Jakub Kiwior has had to adapt to because he didn't speak English when he arrived at Arsenal. But if you look at Arsenal's record with and without William Saliba, so without Saliba and Gabriel, it's pretty crazy. So we saw the impact of Saliba's injury last year on Arsenal. It had a monumental impact, and people say you can't blame losing a title on losing a centre-back. No, we don't blame it on losing a centre-back, but the reality is when you lose a centre-back of William Saliba's quality, it takes a huge hole out of your team. And when we look at the team we had last season, we probably had 12, 13, maximum 14 players that were good enough to be in a title challenge. And even that, some of those players were maybe in there on a stretch, because we look at it this year and we've got a team again of probably 14, 15 players that are good enough to be playing at the very, very top level. And you take William Saliba out of the team, and it's huge. So you look at the games that the results with and without him, our win rate is much lower. So 53% win rate when one of them is out versus 74.5 when someone's missing. We're averaging 2.4 points per game with the two of them together, 1.9 without them. And that's a huge, huge statistic, the number of points per game. And the shots against per game, we're averaging 1.5 shots more per game without one of those two in the team. But let's have a look at what makes them so good and what makes Arsenal so difficult to play against. So first up, we're looking at Arsenal's shape with the ball, because the two of them are so crucial to our first phase build-up, but also our third phase build-up, which sounds daft. But if you look at a lot of these actions are all either goals or shots. So it's all very much final third play. Look at the position of Gabriel and Saliba. Arsenal play a 2-3-5 out of possession, or in possession, sorry, with Gabriel and Saliba sitting very, very high up the park. Three players in front of them, typically Ben White, Jorginho, and Jakub Kiwior, or whoever's playing in the sixth role and the left back position. But the height that Gabriel and Saliba have allows Arsenal to squeeze teams. And if you look at all these pictures, typically there's one player in between the two of them, and then there's three players on the next three. So what that gives you is an isolated approach, a 2-on-1 against the striker. And we know how quick Gabriel and Saliba are. If the team ping that ball long, we know they're going to win a foot race against almost anyone. And when Rob Holding came into the team, fair play to Rob. He tried his best. He did try to replicate what Saliba did, but he didn't have the legs and he didn't have the technical quality that Saliba has. With Gabriel and Saliba, you know time after time after time that they will win foot races against the fastest centre forwards out there. We've seen Saliba body Haaland in a foot race. We've seen him absolutely boss him in 2 games this season already. And a big part of that is because of his physicality, his pace, and just his ability to read the game. But when you look at how high up the park these two are, and this is why I say they're crucial to both our first and third phase attack, if Arsenal lose the ball here, or Arsenal decide they want to go back and start again, they've got 2 centre-backs within the opposition half. If you look at the positions, they're within or beyond the centre circle. Now, that is huge because it means that you're not passing the ball more than 20 yards each time. If you want to go back, you're going back a very, very short distance. And again, that's got the whole opposition team penned within their own half. If they want to counter, it's very, very difficult to get loads of players forward at pace. And if you do, you're reliant on beating someone in a foot race. So when in possession against Arsenal is very difficult because we're so good on the ball. But when you've got 2 centre backs, if they lose it, they're both aerial monsters, both 6'4" defenders. If you want to compete in an aerial battle, you're competing high up the park at this stage. Or if you hoof it beyond them, you've got a goalkeeper who's also playing high that sweeps up a lot of the balls. And the two of them are always willing to receive. So regardless of where they are in this 2-3-5 shape that Arsenal play. And again, we look at this, and this is the goal against Brentford at the weekend. You can see in the circles where William Saliba is. Again, you can see this very rigid, structured 2-3-5 shape. But if you look at the final image on the one on the bottom right, Saliba and Gabriel are approaching the penalty spot. If you're Brentford, how do you get out of that? Look at the man on Gabriel this time. It might be Ivan Toney, but Toney is completely isolated. He's got the length of the pitch to win if he wants to win a foot race with either of them. And I'm telling you now, that ain't happening. So with this really strong, aggressive structure, it allows Arsenal to really play and keep pressing and continue that momentum. So what's interesting about this is if you look at their heat maps, on the left, you've got Gabriel. On the right, you've got William Saliba. Look how congested their play is in and around the halfway line. Yes, like any defender, you're going to spend a lot of time defending your box, corners, crosses, and so on. But these two have a very, very, very heavily congested heat map in and around the halfway line, which shows that is where they play the majority of their football week to week. And we can see again, Saliba, 28 games played. Gabriel, 26. We know Gabriel dropped out of the team at the beginning of the season. He's played every game since. William Saliba has been an ever-present for Arsenal. And both of them have got in the team of the week twice. Their availability is another huge factor in what makes them so good. And again, we look at their positioning and we look at it this time out of possession. So out of possession, Arsenal flicked a 4-4-2. In possession, as we've said, Arsenal go 2-3-5, and it's a very, very aggressive build-up. That 5 players at the front allows us to aggressively counter-press time and time again without losing the defensive structure. But the 4-4-2 out of possession, we see Odegaard and Havertz every time at the front. The two of them charges a two, and Arsenal tend to press teams in groups of four. So you tend to have Odegaard and Havertz and the two players to the left, and then Odegaard and Havertz and the two players to the right, which means that there's only actually four players at a time running for Arsenal. And that allows us to conserve energy and ensure we're not playing a frenzied man-to-man press like we were last season in every moment of every game. And it means when you lose possession, the team have to break you down. There's a real structure to play through, and that makes it very difficult. And when we look at the back line, you see it here, top graphic, very, very structured, rigid line, very old school. Back to the days of George Graham, everyone in line, you can imagine them using a rope in training. One goes forward, the other goes forward. And we've seen Arsenal play more offsides this season. We've seen us be just very, very disciplined. So not only are we playing a high line, we're very rigid and structured in how we play that high line. And again, coming back to the original point of their interview, that is all stemmed from communication. If you don't communicate, one player's too far forward, the other's attacking the ball. If you want to play a high line and a structured, rigid line, you have to communicate with each other. And then we see the bottom one. This leads to Ivan Toney's shot on his left foot. Again, we see Toney has got essentially three defenders around him at this point, but he's getting himself into what would be a foot race with Saliba and Gabriel. He knows he's not winning that, so he launches a shot with his left foot that almost ends up going into the goal. But again, it shows how far someone needs to shoot from to be able to beat this. Again, top graphic is Darwin Núñez. Núñez ends up being called offside for this move. It's a nice ball through, but again, Saliba and Gabriel have him isolated in a 2v1 and are going to win that ball. So no matter who the opposition is, we keep this style. We make sure that we're 4-4-2 out of possession, 2-3-5 in possession. And when you look at Arsenal's stats, and this is what really hits home, Arsenal have the most high turnovers in the league. So that means the most turnovers won in the final third of the park, which shows, again, how important it is to have Gabriel and Saliba up high, and goes back to what I said initially about us being able to win possession high up the park. If we want to go back, if the team want to get out, we've got two players that are really pressed high, that are really suffocating the opposition and stopping them from playing. And with these, 54 of these high turnovers have ended up in a shot, and 6 of those have ended up in a goal. A huge part of that, again, is you lose possession, we counter-press so fast. We've got 5 players that are on you. If that's a back four, you're very quickly outnumbered. Suddenly, the midfielder dropping into defence, and we're almost forcing teams into a low block that maybe don't want to play it. But again, with Gabriel and Saliba so high up the park, we're enabling them to get that ball, recycle it very fast. And if you want to win it, if you look at how high we're winning these high turnovers, it comes back to the positions that the two of them, I mentioned earlier that they're beyond the halfway line, beyond the circle every time. If you look at the base of this line, this is where they're winning the ball. This is where Declan Rice is winning it. Jorginho, Kiwior, Ben White, even Odegaard, Havertz, all these high turnovers are vital to how we play, and they just increase the aggression, increase the intensity. But look at them on the ball. You can see the options the two of them give their players. And the first up, and I felt I had to highlight this, was Ramsdale's error against Brentford at the weekend. When Gabriel gives him the ball, the pass is on very quickly to Saliba. The issue is he takes his time. Well, this is something that we haven't seen from Raya this season. Raya positions himself like an outfielder. And I've been watching Raya quite a bit recently because I've been at a lot of games. So Sheffield United in particular, I was sitting right behind the goal. I had a perfect view of Raya because all the action was at the other end. The first thing I noticed was how he positions himself. He drops forward like an extra centre-back. He doesn't wait as a keeper. He proactively create space for his defenders, and that actually lowers the risk. People may look at that as a goalkeeper that's stepping out, but actually a lot of the time he's reducing the risk by pushing himself forward, and he's given his defender an easier pass. On this occasion, Ramsdale could have swept it straight out to Saliba, who had the option of Ben White, and the whistle probably goes. But when you look at it, the next graphic, Ben White, look at how close Saliba and Gabriel are. And this is a constant throughout every picture I've shown you, every screenshot from a match. Look how close these two are. They're 10 to 15 yards apart every time, whether they're in possession or out of possession. The only time that they ever go further than that is when the goalkeeper or the number 6 drops in between them. And even then, there's still 10 to 15 yards between them and the next player. So again, when I said about the keeper positioning himself to give options, Ben White against Porto, he plays the ball back to Raya. If you look at that, Ben White plays the ball. He's got Saliba coming in. Raya's got the option to give it to him, to Gabriel, to Kiwior. There's actually an option on the far side to Trossard, which I've cut out of this image just because we didn't want too many lines. And again, you look at Gabriel again against Porto. Look at the options he has. So whenever Gabriel got the ball, initially Jorginho was further forward. He drops into the hole. Again, giving him the option. Here, Gabriel ends up giving the ball to Jorginho. He pops it back to Saliba, and we work our way up the pitch. And by being so close to each other, Arsenal always have options. And this is something that Jorginho was struggling with at Chelsea. All the players were 20 yards away from him. And when you don't have legs, it makes it very difficult to play. But with Saliba and Gabriel, you've got two players that can play, are athletic, and can really read the game. But most important, and again, this comes down to communication and discipline, they remain 10 to 15 yards apart at all times. And you can see from every graphic here, so do the rest of the team. We're so structured in and out of the ball. Let's have a look at some of their records this season. Defensive touches by action, loose ball regain, number 1 for Gabriel. Saliba's total successful passes from centre is number 2 in the Premier League, and total successful passes from second, third is number 3 in the Premier League for Gabriel. And we're seeing these two have really strong numbers week after week after week, and that is what makes them so good. But look, ultimately, look, I want to hear what you guys have to say. Put your thoughts in the comments. Please drop a like on this video. It really helps us. If you've enjoyed us, tell us what you think. What makes these two so good? A big part of it for me is Arteta's structure, but you can't achieve a structure like this without having the very best players in the world, having the positional play that we do, and having the athletic ability that Saliba and Gabriel have. And if we had a lesser player in the team, it becomes very, very difficult to play this game with that player because you just can't achieve what we've achieved. But ultimately, look, there's a reason why we are the best defensive team in world football. There's a reason why, and a big part of that, as I've said, is athletic ability, concentration, communication, discipline, structure, all those aspects. And then you put in the very basic, and we haven't even touched on set piece goals because, I mean, that just goes without saying with these two, but they're 6'4", they're huge. You do not want to get in a physical battle with this. These are a far cry from Mustafi and Koscielny. Koscielny was a very good player, but if you come up against a big unit of a 6'4" defender, believe me, you do not want to get into a battle with them. And a big part of what they do, as well as being great defenders, is the psychological battle that they win in every game. But look, thank you to everyone that's joined the show today. As I said, please hit the like button. Please drop us a comment and tell us what you think of these two, what makes them so good. And make sure you tune in again on Tuesday, where we will be doing another deep dive analysis show. Thank you. Have a great day.